2011 produced some fundamental changes. The protester flexed their muscles, policymakers continue to disappoint, and natural disasters impacted one of the most developed economies in the world. So let's take a look back at some of the most remarkable stories of 2011. Unrest continued in Northern Africa and the Middle East as young, educated but unemployed protesters demanded change. On January the 14th, Tunisia was the first domino to fall as President Ben Ali fled to Saudi Arabia after 24 years in power. A few weeks later, on the 11th of February, Hosni Mubarak was forced to resign after almost 3 decades in charge of Egypt. The Arab Spring continued throughout the region, including Libya, a major oil producer. That sent the price of the black stuff soaring by 20% in just 2 weeks and sparking concerns of a global fuel crisis. Then in March, Japan was impacted by 2 huge natural disasters.
The most powerful earthquake in Japan's history hit the northeast coast earlier today, measuring 8.9 on the Richter scale, causing devastation. A 12-metre tsunami hit the coast earlier today, and the nation remains on high alert as further tsunamis of at least 6 metres are expected in the coming hours.
Thousands lost their lives, and the damage to the Fukushima nuclear power plant raised familiar questions about the sustainability of nuclear power. The disaster hit Japan's economy hard, and the consequences are still being felt. Towards the end of the month, the international community started providing key air support for rebels fighting Colonel Gaddafi in Libya. In the midst of these changing times, a Hollywood legend and one of the most recognisable faces on the big screen, Elizabeth Taylor, passed away. 2011 hosted what may have been the most watched television event of all time. Well-wishers from around the globe flooded the streets of London to witness the British royal wedding between Prince William and Kate Middleton. Up to 2 billion people watched the event on TV. And less than a week later, on May the 2nd, America's most wanted man was finally tracked down, leading to this memorable photo featuring President Obama and Hillary Clinton.
Today, at my direction, the United States launched a targeted operation against that compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. A small team of Americans carried out the operation with extraordinary courage and capability. No Americans were harmed. They took care to avoid civilian casualties. After a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden and took custody of his body.
Dominic Strauss-Kahn, the head of the IMF, was in the headlines for all the wrong reasons later that month. The head of the IMF and the man tipped to challenge Nicolas Sarkozy for the French presidency could face 20 years in prison if found guilty of serious sexual assault charges in New York. His arrest has also cast a shadow over vital talks in Europe over the restructuring of Greek debt. He always denied the charges, and the case against him eventually collapsed, although any hopes he might have had to stand in the French presidential election evaporated. In early June, Yemen's president was the latest Middle Eastern autocratic leader to flee to Saudi Arabia after coming under attack by protesters. He later returned to Yemen, but has since agreed to stand down. Late in July, Norway became the focus of world attention.
On Friday the 22nd of July, 7 people were killed in a car bomb blast in Oslo's government district. Hours later, 86 more people were murdered at a Labour Party youth camp on Utøya Island, around 25 miles from the capital. Just hours before the killings took place, a 1,500-page manifesto was posted on the internet detailing his planned attacks and his vision for revolution on Europe. Mr. Breivik also uploaded a 4-part video summarising his manifesto on YouTube.
In the end, Anders Breivik killed a total of 77 people during his rampage. The same weekend, the brilliant but ultimately flawed singer Amy Winehouse was found dead in London. She was 27. The market's attention was fixed on Washington in August as Capitol Hill lawmakers discussed budget plans. But despite talking and talking and talking, no agreement could be found.
Markets across the globe are on high alert following the S&P's downgrade of the US. After months of threats, the credit agency reduced the world's biggest economy to AA+, described by Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner as really terrible judgment.
This contributed to gold reaching an all-time high, moving past the $1,900 mark. Fighting continued in Libya and Tripoli fell to the rebels in late August, effectively ending Gaddafi's regime. At the beginning of September, Japan got a new prime minister, whilst here in Switzerland, the SNB created a 120 floor for the Swiss franc against the euro to help exporters. The Occupy movement hit the streets of New York on September the 17th and spread around the world. And early in October, one of the most influential innovators of his generation died.
The world has lost a visionary. The words of President Obama leading the tributes to Steve Jobs as the world learnt the news the innovator and Apple co-founder has died, aged just 56. His death was announced in a statement from Apple's board in California late on Wednesday. Jobs stepped down from his role as the company's chief executive in August this year after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. He was succeeded by Tim Cook, who wrote a letter to the company employees after the news was announced. Apple has lost a visionary and creative genius, and the world has lost an amazing human being.
As the world was beginning to wonder where he might be, Colonel Gaddafi was found and then killed in Libya on October the 20th. Japan re-entered the currency war at the end of October by undertaking yet another intervention. Much of November was taken up by heightened Eurozone turmoil, with Italy becoming the focus of market attention. Yields on government debt soared to an unsustainable 7+%. As we moved into the last month of the year, it was a familiar story making all the headlines: the Eurozone. A key EU summit in Brussels produced well-intended statements, but the markets were unconvinced. Only a few months after the 10-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, the US pulled combat troops out of Iraq.
So as your Commander-in-Chief, and on behalf of a grateful nation, I'm proud to finally say these two words, and I know your families agree. Welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome home.
And in the run-up to Christmas, North Korean leader Kim Jong-il died of natural causes, paving the way for his son Kim Jong-un to take over. There are of course still some big questions to be answered in 2012, not least who will take over from these three men as president of their respective countries. Also, when and where will the Arab Spring end? And of course, the Eurozone is going to continue to dominate the headlines in 2012. And I'll be speaking about that to Hervé Precher from Credit Suisse. But for now, goodbye.